The last time I saw the man who called the police on me, he flattened himself against the stairwell railing so he would not have to make eye contact with me, like he thought I was about to come at him. I am a 5'6" woman who gets winded carrying groceries up one flight of stairs. But in his head, I was dangerous. And that one moment in the stairwell told me everything about how this whole thing had really gone. My name is Reese, 29F, and I work from home making training videos for a software company. About a year ago, I bought a condo with my best friend and roommate Theo, 30M, because 2 incomes made it possible and neither of us wanted to rent forever. We have a dog, a goofy beagle mix named Biscuit, who is objectively the friendliest animal in the building. We thought we had found a quiet place to finally settle in. Then we met the man who lived above us. I will call him Curtis 42M, because that is not his name, and because he does not deserve his real one in my story. Curtis owned the unit directly over ours. From the first month, Curtis decided that the normal sounds of 2 adults living a normal life were a personal attack on him. We are not loud people. Theo takes work calls. I record training videos at a polite indoor voice. On weekends, we play Dungeons and Dragons with friends online, which mostly means a lot of laughing and the occasional dramatic dice roll. That was the extent of our crime spree. Curtis did not come down and knock. Curtis did not send a text. Curtis went straight to the housing association and filed a noise complaint claiming we were screaming and yelling at all hours. And then, one night, while Theo was sitting at his desk in a headset talking to a friend in a video game voice chat, Curtis called the police and told them he thought there was a violent fight happening in our unit. Possible domestic violence, he said. So that is how my evening ended, with officers at my door, while my roommate sat 10 feet away laughing into a headset about a dragon. The officers were very nice about it. They looked around, saw 2 confused adults and 1 extremely excited beagle, and left. But the complaint did not leave. The housing association notified me that there would be a hearing and that I could be fined for repeated noise violations. I had done nothing, and I was the one facing a penalty. Here is where I will admit I almost just took it. I almost spent the next year tiptoeing around my own home to keep a stranger upstairs happy. But a friend gave me one piece of advice that changed everything. Get a camera. So I did. I put a small camera in our living room, and the plan was simple. If Curtis claimed we were screaming at 2 in the morning, I would have the footage to prove we were asleep. What I did not expect was that the camera would catch Curtis instead. Because in the 2 weeks before the hearing, Curtis found a new hobby. Stomping. Anytime he heard a sound from our unit, he would stomp across his floor as hard as a grown man can stomp. We played D&D for a couple of hours, and our friends could hear the stomping through our microphones. Theo took a call with his supervisor, and the ceiling thundered. I recorded one quiet training video, and it sounded like someone was trying to put a foot through the floor above my desk. And then, because apparently we did not deserve to sleep, Curtis started stomping from 6 to 7 in the morning, back and forth, end to end. We coped the way you cope with something ridiculous. We gave him a nickname, Mr. Stompy, and we laughed every time the ceiling started up again. But I also did something else. I saved the clips, hours of them. Time-stamped, dated, undeniable, and the morning before the hearing, I filed my own noise complaint. I kept it narrow and clean. I did not complain about every stomp. I complained about the stomping at 6 in the morning that was waking us up, and I had the video to prove it. The hearing itself was not the dramatic courtroom moment you might be hoping for. The housing board was calm and fair, almost annoyingly so. But a few things came out of it that made the whole ordeal worth sitting through. First, Curtis announced that he and his girlfriend had actually tried to cancel the hearing and withdraw their complaints, but that once I filed my complaint, they felt they had to defend themselves. Which is a fascinating way to admit your whole case fell apart the second somebody pushed back. Second, when the board asked Curtis to explain the early morning stomping, he looked them in the eye and said he simply had a heavy gait. A heavy gait. For exactly 1 hour. Only in the morning. Only over our bedrooms. The board had my time-stamped clips. Nobody in the room believed him, and a heavy gait does not pause politely for the 3 days a week his girlfriend happened to be home. Which, yes, we had noticed too. Third, when Curtis complained that he could hear us word for word through the floor, one board member just shrugged and said that everyone in the building can hear everyone else, that he was not special, and that this was simply what it meant to share walls. I have never wanted to frame a sentence so badly in my life. The hearing ended in the most diplomatic way possible. All the noise complaints were cleared, no fines for anyone. Curtis and I were both told, like two kids, to go talk it out like adults and only come back if we had tried to communicate first. It was not the public humiliation I had quietly hoped for. But all the complaints against me were gone. And that was the part that actually mattered. And then, Curtis stopped. The stomping ended overnight. The police were never called again. Life went quiet and normal, and honestly, I half forgot to think about him at all, especially because I spent a chunk of that stretch recovering from surgery and just did not have the energy to hold a grudge. But a few weeks later, I got the rest of the story, and it was better than anything that came out at the hearing. I was outside late one night letting Biscuit do her business when I ran into Wes, one of the board members, who walks an ancient little dog that Biscuit adores. Wes apologized to me right there on the sidewalk. He said that he and another board member, Joanne, had not put it together until the hearing that the terrifying neighbor Curtis had been complaining about for months was me. Me. The woman with the beagle that half the building stops to pet. Because, Wes explained, Curtis had been texting him for months. Long messages about how his downstairs neighbors were hostile and abusive, how we shouted threats up at the ceiling, how he genuinely feared for his safety. That was why Wes had told him to call the police, because the board could not act without proof. And here is what Curtis had actually been hearing. He had been taking the dumb, over-the-top things Theo and I yell at each other, the sibling-style bickering of two best friends who live together, and the ridiculous villain lines we shout while rolling dice on a Friday night, and he had decided every one of them was a direct threat against him. For almost as long as he had lived there, a grown man spent months believing that a tabletop game and two roommates teasing each other were a coordinated campaign to terrorize him. Wes and Joanne were kind, but they were also honest. The official board response had to stay neutral. Their personal opinion was that Curtis was, in Wes's words, a deeply strange man, and that everyone on the board now understood exactly what had happened. Which brings me back to the stairwell. A few days after that conversation, I passed Curtis and his girlfriend on the stairs. His girlfriend gave me a warm hi, "How are you?" like a normal person. And Curtis pressed himself flat against the railing and refused to look at me. Like making eye contact with a tired woman in an oversized cardigan was a physical risk. That was the moment I understood I had already won. Not at the hearing. Right there. We have gone back to ignoring each other, which is exactly what I wanted. Theo's anxiety has faded. We got a little loud and a little happy playing video games the other night, and nobody called anybody. Biscuit is still beloved by the entire board. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. For a while, I really believed the right answer was to make myself smaller, to whisper in my own home, to walk softer, to apologize for existing under someone who had already decided I was the villain in a story I was not even in. But you cannot manage another person's imagination by shrinking yourself, and you are not required to tiptoe through your own life to keep a stranger comfortable. I bought my home to live in it. So that is what I am going to keep doing. I will mind my own business, and if he ever decides to mind his, we will get along just fine.